Right. And therefore, the Beinoni really is in a state of constant restlessness, as we've also mentioned, where he's in a struggle all the time between the divine soul and the animal soul, even though, again, he's completely in control of his animal soul in those three realms of action, speech, and thought. But it's still a struggle because the animal soul is still very much vibrant, still very much tempting him. Now, that state of restlessness is almost similar to the state of restlessness that a Rasha has. The Rasha also has struggles, also has a very vibrant animal soul. Difference is that the Rasha is not able to control his animal soul. The Beinoni is. Now, the Beinoni never really reaches a state of tranquility, which could be demoralizing for many people, because we all seek some type of serenity. Let me just arrive to that imaginary island and rest on my laurels and not have to struggle anymore. But that's, I guess, that's an illusion. It's not something that can be achieved in this world, or as I'm sure your grandmothers would say, you rest in your grave. Not really in this world. I had the expression before. In this world, we are here in order to not just struggle, but to grow from that struggle. And that's the key. The growth of the Beinoni specifically because of that struggle. And just as it is in life in general, growth usually comes from struggle. And therefore, we should embrace it and not only grow from it, but sometimes take a pause and look back and say, oh, wow. Yes, on the outside, I do have these temptations like the Rasha. But look at my inner psyche, look at my inner being, look how much I've achieved. And therefore, look how much maybe impact I've had, not just on myself, but on the world around me, which is in many ways the goal of life altogether. You know, even to quote Socrates, who would say an unexamined life is not worth living. A life that's on cruise control is not a life worth living. The life of the Beinoni, on the other hand, is not on cruise control because it's a constant struggle. He always constantly examines himself and makes sure to control the animal soul. But that's a life worth living. And that in many ways is the goal of the Beinoni, which can be attainable for each and all. So that's the short here summary of chapter 12. Let's start right now with the first line of chapter 13. Therewith. Go for it, Jordan. You can continue unless
okay.
Sorry. Yeah.
Sure. Therewith will be understood the commentary of our sages. After explaining at length the essential levels of Tzaddik, Rasha, and Beinoni, the author returns to the questions he raised in the first chapter. That intermediate people are judged by both the good and evil natures, for it is written, regarding the dual components of the Beinoni's inner life, we learn it in Tractate Brachot. He stands at the right hand of the poor man to save him from them that judge his soul.
Mm.
The plural usage, to save him from those who judge his soul, introduces us to those individuals, the Beinonim, who encounter two internal judges, not one.
Right.
Note that they did not say ruled by both, God forbid, because where the evil nature gains any control and dominion over the small city, even though but temporarily, one is at such times deemed wicked.
Right. Yeah, go ahead. One more commentary here. Yeah.
Judged rather than ruled was the sage's choice of words. For when the evil nature holds sway over the small city, the infrastructure of oneself, even temporarily, he is no longer designated a Beinoni. The Beinoni in his outward conduct resembles a tzaddik, utterly without evil for even a moment.
Right. So, by the way, the small city, of course, refers to the being of the person, that there's no dominion of the animal soul over the being of the Beinoni because, again, he's in full control. But there is that judge. There is that struggle from that judgment of the animal soul or from even the temptation of the animal soul. I just want to say that it's interesting because it could be a little bit misleading, because we're really speaking about, and of course we're speaking about this in order to know about ourselves and how to be that ultimate or the best version of yourself, as people say it these days. But there are two states. One state is a state of being, and the other one is a state of doing. As we say, there's the human being and there's human doing. In the state of being, the Beinoni is different than a tzaddik, because in his being, he still has these temptations. He still has an animal soul, as mentioned, that's vibrant. In his state of doing, is exactly like the tzaddik. He's able to control his animal soul. He's able, therefore, to act righteously, to think righteously, to speak righteously. So in his state of doing, he's a tzaddik. In his state of being, it's still very much a tumultuous world in there. It's full of struggle. But because he always makes the right decision, he always leads himself to the right action, he's in a state of doing, which is exactly like the tzaddiks, which is what Rabbi Steinsaltz is saying here. There's no dominion of the animal city over that small city. The small city, with all of its actions and deeds, is a small city of a tzaddik. But in the being itself, there's still a lot going on, a lot of animal soul life going on. So that it's important to create that differentiation, because very often we judge ourselves too harshly. And we say to ourselves, gosh, well, I still have negative thoughts, even though I'm trying my best. And therefore, I can never be, that ultimate tzaddik. Well, it's not true. In the state of doing, you could. State of being doesn't define who you are. It defines maybe your psyche, but it doesn't define who you are and how you'll be remembered, to put it that way, which is maybe the ultimate state of who you are. That's your deeds. And as long as you can always lead yourself to the right deed, to the right word, even to the right thought, then it doesn't matter how much turmoil you have with it. That's the Beinonis. You were born to live like that. But on the other hand, the goal is not to be demoralized by that inner struggle, as we mentioned, but rather to be encouraged by the state of a tzaddik that we can be in our doings. Not necessarily in our beings, because that's not possible for Beinonis, but in our doings. And that's really the source of the encouragement, I think, of the Beinoni, that in the state of doing, we're like tzaddik. We can be like tzaddik. Now, in many, many ways, I want to add another layer to this. Again, I don't want to be the only one speaking, but even though you have that state of being that is, again, full of boisterous struggles from within, that separates us from the tzaddik who doesn't have that, I would say we because of that struggle, we are in many ways on a higher level than a tzaddik. See, because the tzaddik is in some type of cruise control. He doesn't have struggle. So there's no, as they say, there's no chachma. There's no genius for him to make the right decision. He doesn't have a temptation. So of course he makes the right decision. But when you do have a temptation, you nonetheless make the right decision, then you've actually overcome this test. You've proved to yourself, to God, that you're with him, that you care about your relationship with Hashem. And that is something a tzaddik can achieve. That level of commitment, of devotion, in spite of the struggle, that's something that the tzaddik can never have. And therefore, in many ways, even though the state of being, not the state of doing again, state of being of the Beinoni is full of struggle and strife, and it could be demoralizing, we should know that because of that state of being, in many ways, we are higher than tzaddikim themselves. That's why the Talmud says, and the Tanya has stated that where people who do teshuvah stand, even the complete tzaddikim cannot stand. They're on a high level. Why? Because they grow through the struggle has led them to a higher level of being than the tzaddik itself. So if you were demoralized before speaking of that struggle, don't be, because of that struggle, you're higher than the tzaddik. Even if your state of being on paper looks very different. Not the state of doing again, which is important to remember.
There's three kinds of people.
Please.
Those who make things happen, those who watch things happen, and those who don't even know what's going on.
That's right. Those who come too late and say, what just happened? That's right. So in many ways, the Beinoni makes things happen. And not just in the world, because the state of action is, again, it's in its ultimate state, but also in his being, makes things happen. That's right. You know, in many ways, I think that, look, I want to connect this, since tonight and tomorrow and the day after, we're now walking into the final steps of the festival of Pesach, which really celebrates the splitting of the Red Sea. And that's why tomorrow in shuls across the world, we'll be reading the Song of the Red Sea that the Jewish people sang as the Egyptians were being drowned and the sea split for them. Now, Az Yashir Moshe. Now, Kabbalistically, the splitting of the Red Sea, which is the theme again of the next 2 days, represents the splitting of our own seas. It's interesting because, you know, 90% of the treasures in the seas of the world still haven't been discovered. I think that's the number, or maybe even higher. Right? I'm not just talking about the life in the seas, the types of fish that haven't been discovered and so on, but also just natural treasures, or if you wish, treasures of ships that were sunk or whatever it may be. 90% hasn't been discovered. There's so much treasure within the sea. How can they be discovered? By splitting the sea. Same with the human being. There's so many treasures within that we ourselves don't know about ourselves. How can they be discovered? By splitting our own seas, by not just living on the external surfaces of life, by really digging deep within, finding the growth within the struggle of the Beinoni, understanding the psyche of the Beinoni, going to that state of being that we've been speaking about, and asking ourselves, well, okay, how can we make the best of it? And how can we not only grow from it, but even grow to a higher level than a tzaddik, as we just said? And that's really the goal of the human experience, so to speak, to open up ourselves, to split ourselves like a sea, and realize that there's a soul with infinite potential that wants to express itself and not just be divine because it is, but also do divine. And in many ways, that's how we unleash the power of the Beinoni. That's the splitting of the Red Sea, which is exactly what we're speaking about here. There's no coincidence that we're learning about this on the eve of Shvi Shel Pesach. And I will add, this is also why these 2 following days are connected very much to Mashiach. In fact, on the last day, on Shmini Shel Pesach, on the 8th day of Pesach, the Haftarah is all about the Mashiach. And the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, founded the Mashiach meal that many Jews across the world have on the 8th day of Passover to welcome the Mashiach. Why? What's the connection of the Mashiach to this theme? That is because Mashiach is, of course, a human being who will reveal himself, and as Maimonides writes, and usher in a new era of redemption and peace. But it is mostly a state of consciousness, a state of higher consciousness, of the Messiah consciousness. Messiah consciousness is a state in which I am not limited by the world or my animal soul. I think divine and I act divine, like we said. And I therefore see divinity in everything, even in struggle, even in people that are annoying. That's the state of consciousness that Mashiach is. In many ways, if you think of times in which you are at your highest state of consciousness, whether it's Yom Kippur or at the Western Wall, that's the Mashiach consciousness we're speaking about. And that's the type of consciousness we'll all have all the time when Mashiach comes. That state of consciousness is achievable through the splitting of the Red Sea, specifically of our own seas. When we discover that there's a soul that's not limited and filled with anxieties by the limits of this world, and we live and we think and we speak and we act according to the soul itself, then we're in the state of Mashiach consciousness. And that's why there's no better day to celebrate Mashiach and the state of consciousness we should be in to usher in the Mashiach than the day in which we speak of not just the splitting of the sea then, but splitting of our own seas. That leads us to what the Tanya is speaking about here. And that's really the connection. So there's no coincidence again that we are learning about this, and I know we've reached the end of the class already, but bless you and everyone, and myself included, that we should reach that state of Mashiach consciousness, continue to split our own seas, find the power of the Beinoni that lies within, and contage the world, so to speak, with that state, so that eventually Mashiach comes not just in our minds and not just in our thoughts, but in the deeds of the world, in actuality, with a final redemption may come even before we split the sea tomorrow.
Amen.